Right, so if I talk about who I'm with, I'm one of the co-founders of SV2G. We're an arts and heritage organisation, and we have a charity status. So just a little bit, because I need to rush on, I know you all must be hungry. We were established 2003, and we worked with arts and heritage, but when we got involved with Steelpans, we've never looked back. And now we are working in carnival arts a lot more. So I'm here to talk to you about funding, how to get it. I don't know how much I can get done, how to get the funding, and also giving you some examples of our work. So I've picked 3 that I'd like to briefly discuss with you, and I've picked the 3 that are mainly, I think these ones were actually over 40,000, so the smaller ones I won't go into detail today. So a Steelpan Town project is a project we're currently delivering now, and it's based on High Wycombe, that's where we're from. And in High Wycombe, we have a Steelpan Town. I'm sure some of you in the audience remembers Opportunity Knocks. Well, the first steel band to win Opportunity Knocks for 6 consecutive weeks was a band from High Wycombe called the New Sound Crusaders. So that's where the journey started. So every project we do, there's always a little story behind it. So the little story behind it, when we found out about all of these pan pioneers in High Wycombe, what they've achieved, and now what we're picking up as their legacy, we thought, how could we get some funding to, to document what they do? So we applied to the Heritage Lottery Fund, and they gave us 48,000 to complete this project. The funding is very hard to do because we found it difficult to get the funding to say, oh, we just want to document a steel band, basically. What you have to do is include other things with it, other activities for young people. So, for example, with the Steelpan Town project, not only is it an oral history project, but it's working towards, with young people and activities, a bit of intergenerational work. We very much believe in intergenerational work, family learning, enriching lives, connecting communities and so on, and also activities that are cross-curricular that we can embed in schools as well. So we've got the funding for that one, and a Steelpan Stepping Stones project. The reason I've actually put up that one, I've put the quote up from Zebco. I'm sure you can read it. I won't have to read it out. The reason I've done that was as a reminder for me, because one of the things that we have learned when you're applying for funding is about documenting your work, because things like a quote from someone like Zebco, a quote from the chairman of the lottery fund about your project, it's credibility to you and your organisation to get further funding. Bear with me. So, enough about us. I think I don't know how many of you and who I'm speaking to in the audience about funding, but I think there's a bit of a taboo. Not many people like to talk about money. I don't know why. You mentioned the word money and my eyes light up, so I don't know about anyone else in the audience. So I'm going to briefly rush you through about making a good application and what we found that works. So I'm sure there's other people that can say other things. There'll be books, things on the internet you can look up, but this is just examples of what we feel makes a good funding application. So I will discuss with you how to prepare a case, how to gather your information, filling in the application form and a checklist. So preparing your case. The information that you prepare in advance is much more easier for you when you're writing an application. The following information you'll need to provide: a track record of your group. That's really important. That's what I was saying about building your profile, collecting documentation and documenting yourselves. Facts and figures too. I'm really rushing this through. How much time do I have, by the way? Who's chairing? How much time do I have? Okay, right. I usually do this in more detail in seminars as well, so I'm just going to try and rush through as much as I can. Just bear with me, sorry. So, facts and figures. It's very important you do your research and evidence your need. I'll explain a bit more later. Project plan and budget, as we all know, get organised. If you don't know how to write a project plan or do a budget, then try and get volunteers or commission someone that can help you in terms of writing a project plan and writing your budget. And then evidence, again, attach a CV. Somebody in your group that's working on an application, if you've got the experience, try and, attach a CV to your application as well. So that shows the funders, the funding bodies, that you are more than capable of delivering that project. So about your group, a statement what your group does, it's pretty much simple. And again, it's laying it out, why your work is important to you and why should funders support you and your group and what you do. Your legal status is very important. These days, the majority of funding that you apply for, you must have legal status. I think one of the quickest and best ways of having legal status is to become charity registered. Becoming charity registered, you're opening yourself to attract more funding that way. And then again, the people involved in your group. Make sure you list who they are, what they do, etc. And then copies of your last annual reports. I've been working with a couple steel bands as well and helping them, and I found that in terms of pulling annual reports and pulling in accounts was very difficult. We actually pay for an accountant to audit our accounts, and that's surely because of the amount of funds we attract. We have to do that by law. But a simple spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, where you're actually documenting your ins and outs, and obviously having a bank account is very important and sometimes does suffice for an application. So, gathering your information. That's really important about gathering your information. You've got to sell yourself, and the competition's getting very high these days with lots of different groups trying to apply for funding. So funders want to know what difference you're going to make with your money, with their money, before they hand it over to you. Again, I mentioned research. The national census is very good to use. I'll give you an example. I can only give an example with who I've worked with, SV2G. So when I looked at the 2011 census, I went into and actually looked at the local population profile. And there I found that for Wickham district alone, not Buckinghamshire, but just for Wickham district alone, the population increased by 6%. There was a need to promote good health and well-being. The ethnic mix of the population is changing, and services need to reflect this new vibrant cultural mix. That's where we step in with our activities, turning them into projects. There's also a strong family market in Wickham, and the elderly population has also increased. So what we did, with all that data and information, we just pulled together a statement that we can actually, a paragraph that we can add into our application. So the paragraph goes as this. There is an opportunity to engage with those out of work and needed to develop skills in education. 3% of 16 to 74-year-olds are unemployed and actively seek work. And approximately 1,000 people in this group are aged between 16 and 24. Furthermore, 2% of people aged between 16 and 17 are economically inactive due to long-term sickness or disability. And finally, 17% of residents 16 plus have no qualifications, 5% lower than the national average wage. That's a mouthful, but from that we can actually pick out, and we found our need. And in there, those needs is what we look at and how we turn our activities into a project. Am I making sense there? Is everyone with me? Okay. So there's other potential sources you can use as well. Any local authority will have a community plan. That's the criteria. See how you fit into your local plan so you can apply for funding. They do all the work for you, so you don't have to search so much. And also health authorities, you can contact relevant departments, universities and colleges. They do lots of local research in every area. Right, your group's credibility and competence. Your reputation, your track record. I've mentioned this probably several times since I've been up here. That is so important. When you're deciding to make a grant, funders not only want to believe your idea is good, they want to know that they're giving the money to competent organisations that has the ability to manage money. Okay? Potential funders. Finding potential funders is like a needle in a haystack sometimes. But once you've identified who to approach, and again, I can give, if anyone wanted to speak to me separately, I could give you some potential funders. You can just go online and look at Lottery Heritage Fund, the Arts Council. They're not the only people. What I've found now, I'm actually gearing towards and moving towards trusts and also third-party commissioning. So we're actually commissioned with our local authority and taking on bigger bids. So think about what sort of work you're going to be doing and if they will fund it and how you fit into their criteria. And an example for that is I wanted to document the New Stand Crusaders, but it wasn't just an oral history project. We had to look at the criteria. And in fact, it was the young roots that we applied to where the funding was from. Not usually it's the Heritage Lottery Fund we tend to go to, but the young roots actually fell in line because we did a lot of intergenerational work. We got our young people to interview a lot of these Steelpan musicians because a lot of them are alive and well. Unfortunately, 2 of them has passed away since we've been doing the project, but we've managed to document their life history and lots of other steel bands because just out of interest, we've actually researched and found that one band was formed in the 50s called the Castrals. And again, you go on the internet, you won't find anything about it. So our work, again, is very unique and very important, not only for our area, but for the Steelpan sector in the UK. Okay. I don't know how I'm doing with time. Am I good? Okay, filling in an application form. So we need to be specific. Most funders want us to identify a piece of work and then you can just put in the cost attached to it. So you need to package your funding needs into discrete projects in order to attract those funding. Meeting a need, as I explained how earlier on, that's really important, meeting your need. Definitely use the census because that tells you everything about what's going on in society today and how it benefits you, so identifying likely outcomes. Let's not confuse. Anybody that's applied for funding in the room knows about outputs? Okay, I always get confused about outcomes and outputs because they both differ. An objective is what we aim to achieve, and output is what we actually deliver, and your outcome is what the business gains from the output. Okay, so realistic. Make sure your application form is achievable. An example with SV2G, I applied for funding in 2011 for an intergenerational project. We have the largest population of Vincentians based in High Wycombe, and I wanted to document the migration. I applied for the funding and I got turned away. And I applied again and I got turned away. And then I made a point of putting it in my diary every month to phone and speak to somebody. Why was I turned away? And in the end, they asked me to come in and they sat down with me. I had 2 officers that sat with me in a boardroom and they went through exactly what the application was about and what we were trying to achieve. And what they told me was, it was just too ambitious. And that big project, and I just said, what do you mean it's too ambitious? They said, well, all what you want to do is wonderful and it's commendable, but you're asking for 50,000, it's not enough. So we're not going to give you that money because you're going to fail, because you won't be able to achieve all what you want to. So what they taught me and went through with me was how to break down that one big plan into achievable projects. So it was all broken down into sub-projects. So that is what we're working on. That alone is a business plan in itself. So that's what we're working on. So we've got lots of other things we'll be applying for to keep us going. As an organisation, and we run a steel band, Wycombe Steel Orchestra, and we also manage the School of Steel Pans. The funding is very hard. Core funding to keep things running is very hard. And the way we have to manage ourselves, we have to become sustainable by being project-led and looking at other outcomes as well. So we do have other outcomes that helps us bring money in. So that helps us. Okay. So again, cost effective, must show value for money, and that says it within itself. I need to explain that to you. I'm getting there. So there's a checklist. The checklist is pretty simple. Have you fitted into the funders' policies and criteria? So once you've got an idea and you can find some pots of money, you've got to make sure you read their criteria and make sure you fit in, your activities fit in with that criteria, and that will help you. Again, I spoke about, it's the amount of money that you're requesting. I gave you a wonderful example with SV2G when we applied for the funding and it was just too ambitious. And again, the timing is right. There's two things to work with timing. One is the deadlines, but also there's key times when people would apply for money. So a good time not to apply would be just before Christmas or in the new year, because a lot of people would be rushing, trying to get an application form in before Christmas, and they'd be rushing, they'd be working on an application over Christmas to get it in after Christmas. And again, so I think for Easter and for summer. That's what we've learned. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, I mean, we've applied for funding and we haven't got it, surely, and we've had a very good response. And what they've said to us, apply again. And that's purely because the panel that sits, especially if it's a carnival project, they're not advocates for carnival arts, and they would favour something else rather than carnival arts. But, you know, the report you get back and how the application form is written, all your feedback was 100%. So they encourage you to apply. So don't, you know, my message to you today is, you know, don't be put off. Just keep applying. And, you know, if you don't get it in one area, find another. I've got this wonderful idea to work with an orchestra. I didn't get it from one trust fund, and I didn't get it from another funding body, but the same idea, I've managed to find another criteria to fit into it, so I'll be applying for that. So always hold on to your ideas. You shelve them, never get rid of them, keep them. Evidence. We talked about evidence in making sure you collate and document your work. Anything you do, document it, and because it's needed. And again, your evidence in terms of research, again, the local council plan for the area, as well as the 2011 census. Have you demonstrated you will evaluate your grant? That's a seminar you can do on evaluation. Self-evaluation as well as project evaluation is very key. Make sure you actually tell them and show them in your project how you plan to evaluate your work. Have you established that your group has the ability, skills and resources to deliver your project? As again, attach CVs, anybody with any experience, document it and make sure it's there to support your application. So other funding strands, again I spoke about earlier, is commissioning, bid writing and tendering. That's something I can talk about and do a whole seminar on. Sponsorship, CSR, corporate and social responsibility of commercial companies. Everybody should know about CSR. Anybody that's applying, especially if you're playing in Carnival, in Panorama, go to your local companies, because corporate social responsibility is key to a lot of companies and they want to make themselves look good in public. So giving funding to groups, it helps them. Social enterprise. So that's trading to generate income, and that's something everybody needs to look at. Again, in Steelpans, that is going out teaching in schools, doing one-to-one private lessons, running workshops, corporate events. That's how we bring in a major lot of our money. And then that's it, that's me. I'm sorry it's rushed.